Hello everyone, it's Arali, and in a recent video that I did, I talked about a concept for an underwater expansion. In conjunction with this, I wanted to make a fun little theory video about Mellaggan. Now, for those of you that do not know who Mellaggan is, I will give a quick rundown of what we know, and then I'll be jumping into this crackpot theory that I have. The text for what we know about Mellaggan is taken straight from the wiki, so once again, shout out to the wiki team for all their efforts. As always, beware of spoilers, and this is obviously our conjecture when it comes to the theory part. With all that said, let's just get right into it. So who is Mellaggan? Mellaggan is the Quaggan goddess that represents the bounty and wealth of the ocean. She's suggested to be an interpretation of the human god Melandru. However, the Quaggans view the two to be separate deities, but are too polite to say so when human scholars claim otherwise. The Quaggans believe their goddess was killed long ago when the Krayt invaded their old homelands. Despite this, Mellaggan continues to have shamans in the present day. Some Quaggans believe that Mellaggan drew them to shallow waters because the Krayt, sharks, and scale would be less dangerous foes than what the Quaggans left behind in the depths of the unending ocean. According to a Quaggan that traveled to Cantha, Mellaggan's true identity is Suwan. When the elder dragon Zaitan awoke, Suwan left the unending ocean for Cantha, protecting it from the rising of ore and leading the Quaggans to believe she had died. The Quaggan in Cantha believes Suwan betrayed the Quaggans, forsaking them and her name in favor of the Canthans. Whether this Quaggan is telling the truth is unknown. That is pretty much all we know about Mellaggan. She is still heavily worshipped by the Quaggans to this day, and whether or not she truly died, or if she was Suwan who now has died herself, is completely unknown, but that is where theorizing comes in. Based on what we know, I wanted to do a fun little theory with different variations. Alright, so everything we know about what Mellaggan looks like builds on the idea of Melandru apparently being mistaken for Mellaggan. But what if this is not a complete mistake? Melandru is the goddess of nature, earth, and growth, but what does earth need in order to grow anything? Well, water, of course. It's almost as if the two ideas of water and earth/nature are bound together in a way. What if Mellaggan is related to Melandru somehow? She could be her twin sister, mother, or daughter. As of right now, we do not know where the gods come from, what it takes to be a quote-unquote god, and we do not know how many of these powerful magical beings from another realm there really are. So let's say Mellaggan is the sister or mother of Melandru, since water and earth are two closely related elements both in concept and reality. In this case, she could have come from the other realm with the gods and the humans, but upon arriving, decided to leave them behind. She could have asked Abaddon, who was still in good standing at the time, to take over her domain of water, and as the keeper of secrets, erase any mention of her from any records. She perhaps, in this world, wanted to find a peaceful place, and maybe other peaceful beings, and live out the rest of her days. That is when she stumbled upon the Quaggans and became their deity. Okay, let's backtrack a little and go with a different possibility. We have seen the gods be able to have children, since Grenth is the son of Dwayna and most likely Malcor. Born a half-god, he rose to godhood by defeating Doom and imprisoning him. So what if Grenth wasn't the only half-god that was born on Tyria? What if Melandru had relations with a human and a half-goddess was born, namely Mellaggan? Or perhaps she wasn't born of a human, but she is the secret child of Melandru and Abaddon. This might be a bit of a stretch, but it could explain not only why she would be confused with Melandru, since they would obviously look alike, but she could have gotten her domain from Abaddon, since as far as we know, he was the original god of water. She never wanted any part of being in the pantheon of the gods, and left to venture the unending ocean, and eventually came across the Quaggans and decided to live with them. I know many people would like the gods to be reintroduced to the story and given proper background and story, so I figured that we could perhaps slowly do this by having Mellaggan be the trigger. If we have, let's say, an underwater expansion, and we find out more about the Quaggans and their struggle, we would most certainly find out more about Mellaggan as well. We could find ancient scriptures or texts that ended up being preserved by survivors of the fall of the royal capital of the Quaggans, and here we learn about this history of Mellaggan, giving us little hints into more background to the gods. Alright, let's move on a little further. So, Mellaggan lived among the Quaggans as their deity. When the Krayt invaded the homelands of the Quaggans, she perhaps sacrificed herself in order to help the Quaggans escape. This is something we get hints of, but let's think about the one Quaggan we see in Dragon's End that talks about Suan being Mellaggan. Well, that is a very odd thing to say, isn't it? How would a human-looking deity be mistaken for an underwater dragon? As far as we know, Suan never took on the form of a human like Cunavang did. This Quaggan also talks about how Suan betrayed them by leaving them behind to save humans and changed her name from Mellaggan to Suan. That is an incredibly weird thing to say, wouldn't you agree? So here's a way to twist this whole conversation to make sense. What happens when an incredibly powerful magical being dies? Well, their magic is released. Okay, so what if Suan absorbed this magic when Mellaggan died, perhaps on Mellaggan's accord, in order to not let the magic be absorbed by some powerful priest of the Crate instead? Suan then absorbed the magic and eventually left to save the humans after the Rising of Or. This is why Suan could be mistaken for Mellaggan. Her magic is inside of Suan. This is something we have seen before, if you remember Saphira from Living World Season 4. For those of you who do not know who Saphira is, she is a priestess of Balthazar that followed him throughout his campaign in Path of Fire. After his death, she fights us for his sword, and we kind of befriend her in a way. Eventually, she comes to realize that she can still feel Balthazar's presence. Why is that, you might ask? Well, because Aurene absorbed a lot of Balthazar's magic when he was defeated, so anytime she was near the dragon, she could feel her deity's presence. Going back to the Quaggan, perhaps this is exactly what is happening here? Since Suan absorbed Mellaggan's magic, the Quaggan can feel her presence within Suan and mistakes her for having transformed into this dragon and changing her name. So in turn, this Quaggan doesn't quite understand that it's just her magic that he's feeling and not the deity herself. This would explain the entirety of this weird, randomly placed conversation. Most of this could be explained in some of those scriptures I've talked about, or in the other video I mentioned some memory crystals that were left behind by Suan. One of those crystals perhaps could contain the last conversation between Mellaggan and Suan, where she outright pleads with Suan to absorb her power. I think the pieces here would fit together really well, and like I said, I think this would be a great way to reintroduce the gods to the story. Alright, well that is pretty much it for this theory. Obviously, I would love to hear what you guys think, or perhaps you have your own theory on what or who Mellaggan truly is. Also, if you want to watch my other video where I talked about the underwater expansion concept, I will leave a link in the description down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you all for watching. I will see you all next time. Bye guys!